Hola a todos, espero que estén bien. Hoy vamos a estar hablando del imperativo en español. So today we're going to be talking about the imperative, and we're going to be talking about the affirmative, because there are two types of imperative. There's the affirmative and then there's the negative. But this lesson will focus on the affirmative, which is otherwise known as the positive. All right? So let us get into it. Right, so el imperativo. El imperativo. Now, the image on screen is very fitting given what the imperative is about, right? But before we get into the different conjugations of the verbs and all that, we need to know what the imperative is used for. And that's what we're going to see right now. So the uses of the imperative. So the imperative is known as a verb form it is a verb form that is used to give orders to persons, make suggestions, recommendations, prohibit actions, or to make requests. Right. So that means that basically the imperative is used to give commands, because all of these can be categorized as commands. Okay? Now, I said it's a verb form. It's sometimes referred to as a mood. It's not a tense, but you can refer to it as a verb form or a mood. But these are the uses of the imperative. But if you want to summarize the uses, you can say that it is used to give commands. Now, of course, when it comes to the persons that we are addressing, that is what we refer to as the different forms of the imperative. Okay? And you're going to see that we have many different forms. We have, and these forms are going to differ in terms of formality and number. When it comes to gender, gender is not an issue here. The issue is going to be the number of people that we're talking to, or the formality. So how familiar are we with these persons, okay? So let's say there are five. There are mainly four, but I still include the fifth one, and you'll see why. Now, the first form of the imperative is going to be the tu, which, as you know, is a second person singular, right? That is going to be used for persons that we know very well, right? And it's going to be talking about one person. So a family member, a friend, what have you. So that is going to be the tu. When we are talking about someone, no, sorry, when we're talking to someone, or we're addressing someone that we know very well, we would use the to form of the verb, right? And of course, I'm going to show you how to actually form these different, how to conjugate the verbs to cater to the person that is being addressed, all right? But the to refers to someone that you know very well, and that's one person. Now, the usted refers to someone that you know that you do not know very well, a stranger, right? Or like an elder person that would be in authority. All right. So that is what we will call the usted form. That would be the formal. Now, when it comes to the nosotros, now the nosotros, as you know, will be the first person plural we. But this is where you're addressing a collective in which you are included, right? So it's like saying, let us, do whatever, right? Now the ustedes is just the plural form of the usted. So that's going to be used with persons that you do not know, when you're addressing more than one person that you do not know very well. It can also be used to address persons that you know very well. All right. So the ustedes can be formal and informal, right? Both of those both formalities are both ustedes can be used for both formalities, right? But when it comes to the vosotros, this is only going to be used with persons that you know. And this is used in Spain. All right. So the vosotros is going to be for people that you know. If it's more than one person that you know very well, you can use vosotros. But you never use this in a formal situation. All right. But this is used in Spain, but he still chose to include it. Mhm. So these are the 5 forms of the imperative. And when I say form, you know that I'm talking about who is being spoken to. Okay. So now let's get into the conjugations of the different forms. All right, so to form the affirmative of the two, which is the familiar, right? This is someone that you know very well. We use the third person singular present tense conjugation of the verb. Simple, right? So wash the clothes would be lava la ropa. As you see, we use the third person singular conjugation, the el usted form. Eat the apple. Come la manzana. Eat the apple, right? Measure the cup. Mide la taza. So we see in all these examples, we use the third person singular present tense conjugation of the verb. Of course, they're irregulars. So these ones you will have to learn. All right. So we have se, di, as, be, con, sal, ben, ten. All right. So we don't, if we want to tell someone to do something, we don't say hace, because remember that's the third person singular present tense conjugation. No, that would be wrong. It's as. So these are ones you will have to learn by heart. But generally, to form to conjugate the verb according to the to form, we simply use the third person singular present tense conjugation of the verb. All right. Let's look at some examples of the irregulars. Sé honesto, di la verdad, pon la mesa, and haz la cama. Now let's go on to the usted form. So to form the usted, to conjugate the verb according to the usted, you can do it in 2 ways. This is the first. So we use the first person singular present tense conjugation of the verb. However, the O will be removed and the opposite endings will be added. So in essence, if it's an AR verb, it would end in E. And if it's an IR or ER verb, it would end in A. All right. So that's one way that we can form the usted, that we can conjugate the verb according to the usted form. However, this will also be the third person singular present subjunctive conjugation of the verb. All right. So if you don't really know the subjunctive, which is hard to believe are if you are learning the imperative, right? Because they are connected, right? But if you don't know the subjunctive, I use the first method to help you, right? If you already know the present subjunctive, then it'll be easy. You would already know. But if you don't know, to form it, we just use the first person singular present tense of the verb. We remove the O, and then we add the appropriate endings based on the type of verb. So if it's an AR verb, we add E, and if it's an IR or ER verb, we add it. Okay? So let's look at an example. Be careful. You know that the expression in Spanish for be careful is tener cuidado. So we have the verb tener. We conjugate it in the first person singular present tense. So we get tengo. Remove the O, and because this is an ER verb, we add a. Therefore, tenga cuidado. Be careful. All right. If we wanted to conjugate this according to cater to the to form, we would say ten cuidado. Right? So yeah. So this is how you would form the this is how you would conjugate the verb according to the usted. Now the irregulars. So the same guilty verbs. Ser, ir, dar, estar, saber. So you have the irregular form, and then you have them with in examples. So ser simpático, vaya con Dios, deme el libro. And you will see with dar, I use an indirect object pronoun, and that's actually something that we're going to do a little later, using object pronouns with affirmative commands. Esté listo and sepa la verdad. So these forms you would have to learn. Now let's get on to the nosotros form. So I also use the same two methods I would have used with the usted form. So to form the first person plural, we use the present subjunctive of the first person, right? So the nosotros form. If you're not familiar with the subjunctive, then you can use the second method, which is to use the first person singular present tense of the verb, the yo form. You remove the O, and then the appropriate endings are added based on the type of verb. So if it's an AR verb, you add hemos, and if it's an IR or ER verb, you add amos. Okay? So let's look at a few examples. Trabajar, we have trabajo, right? So remove the O, and this is an AR verb, so we add hemos. Trabajemos, let's work. Comer, como, move the O, and we add amos since this is an ER verb, and we have comamos, let's eat. Vivir, we have vivo, move the O, and since it is an IR verb, we add amos, vivamos, let's live. So to conjugate the verb according to the nosotros form, we can either use the first person plural present subjunctive of the verb, or we can use the first person present singular and just remove the O and add the appropriate ending based on the type of verb. Okay? And the irregulars, right? So we have seamos simpáticos, vayamos al centro comercial, demos a luz, estemos listos, and sepamos la verdad. All right? Now we move on to the ustedes. So you can form the ustedes by using the first person singular present tense conjugation of the verb, and then you remove the O, and the opposite endings will be added. So once again, if it's an AR verb, we add N, and if it's an IR or ER verb, we add an. All right, and this will also be the third person plural present subjunctive conjugation of the verb. So tener cuidado, let's put in the first person. You would have excuse me, you would have tengo. We remove the O, and then we would add an, right? An rather. So you would have an, tengan cuidado. All right? Mhm. All right? So basically that is just the plural form of the usted. So I could actually have made I could have actually made it simpler, right? By saying you just add n because this is just the plural form of usted, right? Just add n to the usted form. Mhm. Because this is the plural. And the irregulars, sean simpáticos, vayan al centro comercial, den a luz, estén listos, sepan la verdad. Now, when it comes to the vosotros, this is actually one of the easiest forms. So to form the affirmative, all we do is we drop the R at the end of we drop the R because you would have the verb in its infinitive, and you just put a D in place of the R, right? And this will apply to every verb regardless of its form in other tenses. So the ser, the saber, the dar, all those verbs that are usually irregular will take the same form, all right? So hablar, remove the R and we put D. So if we're talking to more than one person that we know, we would say hablad, talk, hablad. Venir, venid, venid. All right. Escribir, escribid. So we just remove the R from the infinitive and we add D. Simple. Now let's look at some spelling changes. We would have looked at irregular verbs and what have you, but there's some verbs that carry some that undergo some spelling changes. And these spelling changes are going to be mainly in the usted, the nosotros, and the ustedes forms, right? So verbs that end in gar will take gu plus the endings. For example, pagar, which means to pay. So you have pague, so you see the gar changes to gu. So pague, paguemos, and paguen. Mhm. And those would represent the usted, the nosotros, and the ustedes forms respectively, okay? The ZAR verbs will take C. So we have empezar, which means to begin, empiece, empecemos, empiecen. All right. So you would see that in the nosotros form, the I isn't used. All right. So you will realize that. So that would be the same thing with comenzar. We would say comencemos. We wouldn't say we wouldn't say comenciemos. We say comencemos. But for the other two forms, you would have the I, the radical change within it. Okay? The IE. All right. And CAR verbs will take QU. So buscar, which means to search. We have busque, busquemos, and busquen. Mhm. Right. So those are some spelling changes that will take place with some verbs. Okay. Now, when it comes to the pronouns, how do pronouns work with the affirmative? So in the affirmative, object pronouns are attached to the conjugated verb. So we conjugate the verb according to the form, right, or the person that we're addressing, and then we would attach the object pronoun afterwards. And the object pronoun can be direct or indirect, or it could be both, right? You know that if you're attaching both the direct and the indirect, you know the indirect has to go first. And if it is referring to the third person, singular or plural, we would use, it changes to say, and then you use the direct object, okay? So tell me, let's look at the first part, D. D relates to the to form of the verb, so we're obviously talking to someone that we know very well, and then the object pronoun will be me, which is indirect. Dime. Dime, right. So you see on the right, I would have broken it down. I would have isolated the verb and the object pronoun. So dime, tell me. Right. Dime. All right. And the thing about it, I could have included the direct object, right? Because but it's implied. If I say dime, then that means that you have to tell me something. So it's implied there. The direct object will be implied there. Dime. Whatever it is I want you to tell me. Ask him. You have pregúntale. Pregúntale. Pregunta would be the once again that would be the to form because it's a third person singular conjugation, and le would be object pronoun, and that's indirect. Once again, the direct object would be implied because you have to ask him something. Okay? So pregúntale. And sometimes you will have to add accents depending on the amount of syllables in the word. Okay? Look at her. Mírela. Mírela. So that's the usted form. Mírela. And la would be object pronoun, the direct object. Mírela. And let's do it. Hagámoslo. Right? That would be the nosotros form. And we add the object pronoun, the direct object pronoun lo. Let us do it. All right? So we literally sort of put object pronouns to use object pronouns with affirmative commands. They go attached to the conjugated verb. All right? And the same thing applies with reflexive pronouns. They are attached to the conjugated verb. And I would have done the same breakdown here as I did with the object pronouns. So we conjugate the verb according to the form, the person being addressed, and then we add the reflexive pronoun. Okay? So veca, despiértate. Sit down, siéntense. All right? Stand up, levantaos. Now, when it comes to the vosotros form, when we're using reflexive pronouns in the vosotros form, the D is removed. You know, in the affirmative, you would change the R to a D. You drop the R from the infinitive and you add D. Well, with reflexive pronouns, you remove the D. And you would add the reflexive pronoun afterwards. So you don't say levantados. No, you say levantaos. So you remove the D and you add the reflexive pronoun. Now, the only irregular verb would be irse. In that case, you would actually use the D. You would say idos. Idos. Right? So that's the only verb that would be irregular. Idos. Which would mean to leave, which would be used to say leave, right? Go to bed, acuéstense, acuéstense. Right. So these are the rules for using reflexive pronouns with affirmative commands. All right. So this brings us to the end of this lesson on the imperative. I hope that you understood it. Espero que les guste el video. Muchas gracias por ver y hasta la próxima.